when you think about it, right, your tertiary education in university, sometimes it's too late to change people's mindset.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I think it needs to start at the grassroots, right? From, the primary schools, your secondary schools. They already need to start, run things like hackathons and do some coding programs. And it needs to be part and parcel of your day-to-day education, because then it becomes muscle memory. People will remember it, right? And I think then it's really when you can start seeing change happen.
That's right.
If you're going to wait until someone matures, it's too late sometimes. Not for everyone, maybe, right? People can still turn things around.
Yeah.
But I think really to have a much bigger impact, I think the education curriculum needs to change, right? And you need to start giving people time, giving students time to explore, right, what they can do and to expose them to new technology, right? I think that's probably the only way to do it.
Yeah. Before we begin the podcast, have you gotten your free ebook? It's called the Build a Six-Figure Portfolio Guidebook. Now, inside it, we share with you the tips and tricks to bring your stock investing skills to the next level. The best part, it's only 10 pages long and it's totally free. Whether you're on Spotify or YouTube, the link to download is in the description, or you can go to www.firl.co/FREE or www.firl.co/free. Hello, and welcome back to the FIRL podcast, best place for long-term stock investors. MJ, today is going to be a slightly different flavor, right, MJ?
Different flavor, but not any worse.
Oh, no, anyway, it's going to be any better.
Yeah.
So today we have a Malaysianized Dutchman, as I will call him. I hope pun intended. And he's actually the Chief Innovation Officer of the Sunway Group. And he has been around in Malaysia for quite some time, as we will uncover through this podcast. And the objective of this podcast is really to understand the startup scene, the incubator scene, and see how far Malaysian innovators have come through. So, Matt, I always can't pronounce your last name, Matt. Can you pronounce it for the audience for me?
It's Van Leeuwen.
Van Leeuwen, right? So
Van Leeuwen, yeah.
And how do I pronounce the Matt?
Is it Matthijs?
Okay.
Matthijs?
Yeah, it's Matthijs.
Matthijs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matthijs van Leeuwen, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, nice to be here, John and MJ. And by the way, you call me Malaysianized, which I think is quite well pointed out. And to me, someone who's Malaysianized if you fulfill three characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. So first of all, someone's Malaysianized if he eats nasi lemak for breakfast. Yeah. Not just nasi lemak, but nasi lemak ayam goreng.
Oh, yes. That's very Malaysian.
When my parents came here and saw me eating rice and fried chicken for breakfast, they thought I was crazy.
Until
so
they tried it, right?
Like 12 years in Malaysia does to you. And the second thing is like if you have had dengue.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You're definitely part of the Malaysia club. And thirdly, someone who's married to a Malaysian wife or a husband, of course, for the ladies out there.
Yes.
Properly Malaysianized.
And I understand your children even go to a Chinese school. That's where, correct me if I'm wrong, they attend a Chinese school.
You've done your research.
Yeah, remember we had that chat I was asking.
Oh, we had that chat before. You have a good memory.
Yeah.
Chinese school.
Yeah. So I'm happy to have a Dutchman, a Malaysianized Dutchman in Malaysia. And probably I'll start off the podcast by asking, way back when you were still in Holland, where do you grow up? What was a 15-year-old Matthijs like? Matthijs, right?
Yeah, it's okay. You can call me Matt.
Matt. Yeah. What was a 15-year-old Matt like, actually?
15 years old Matt was not that different. But one of the things, like when I was in secondary school, there was one thing that was like the most important thing to me, like more important than anything else, which was tennis.
Oh,
right. And so, a lot of people don't know about me, but I actually played tennis on a national and at some point also international level when I was in the Netherlands. At some point when I was 15, I was in the top 10 for my age group. And so really for me, when I was 15, I think even during school times, or once I finished school, straight away I got on my bike, cycled for 20, 30 minutes to the train station, took a train ride for 45 minutes where someone picked me up, and then was another 20 minutes drive to get to the tennis court where, one of the best players in that particular regions were being coached. And so I did this every day. And so after school, I didn't have time to play with my friends, but went play tennis and came back home probably 9 p.m., had some food and went to sleep, right? And while I was on the train, I did my homework as much as I could.
Whoa.
But tennis was very central, and it was really something that was cultivated in my family. So I'm coming from a very close family with one older brother, and really, even our holidays, right? Like our Easter holiday or summer holiday, it was all about tennis, because I went from one tournament to the next. And my parents and my brother always had to follow me everywhere. And so I'm very, very lucky that I got all that support. And I think that those days also, made me more competitive, I suppose, really wanting to win and winning tournaments. And that stays, but it's now translated to winning in business as well.
Okay.
Right. So I think it's been an interesting foundation or grounding for me growing up in that sort of competitive tennis environment. Yeah.
And why didn't you become the next Djokovic?
Yeah, I was actually just follow up that. Like, is it like, are you team Djokovic, Nadal, or Federer?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in my days, it was like Andre Agassi and
Pete Sampras.
Right. I'm a bit older than you guys probably. But actually, so when I was 17, I got an arm injury. And like you have a tennis elbow. So then you have like pain on the top of your arm, right, on your elbow. Yeah. But I actually had a golfer's elbow, which is on the bottom part on your underarm.
Oh.
And so I got a lot of pain, but I still kept playing tennis. And it got worse and worse, to a point that my parents took me to various hospitals to just get an opinion on, like, can they fix this or not? Mm-hmm. And so after a few opinions, they told me that they can fix it. They can basically shorten that ligament that was like really badly inflamed. Okay. But there was a 30% chance that I would never be able to stretch my arm fully anymore.
Oh my God.
30% chance. And, like for 17, 18-year-olds almost going to university, my parents say, this is too much, too much of a risk. Mm-hmm. So then I almost instantly quit after that. It was quite a big shock, right? Because someone who plays tennis every day to someone who goes to university and then explores other interesting thing of life, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which maybe, is after, looking back in hindsight, maybe it's a good thing, because some of my friends who did go further and wanted to become a professional tennis player didn't really make it. I see. They got, one of my good friends, they got to the number 150 position in the world. Okay. And, it's just like, once you're 150 in the world, you can just pay your fees and your travel and your hotels to go from tournament to tournament, and your manager, but you can't really make a good living out of it. That's right. It's really, if you're consistently in the top 100, top 50, where you can actually make a very good living and become rich out of it, right? Yeah. And there's only very few that can make it, like a Djokovic or a Sampras or Agassi. Yeah, so I'm glad in a way that I chose a different route and went to university, and then started to do more business after that. I see. So MJ was asking, Nadal or Federer or Djokovic, which camp are you in? If you still watch. Yeah, well, Djokovic's definitely out of favor now. His recent sort of involvements and being so outspoken about vaccination. I don't think that was a very, very smart move on his side. So, I love the elegance of Federer, right? Just the way he plays. It's just a flair, and, it just looks so easy. Yeah. So I really enjoy watching Federer, but at the same time, Nadal is more like a wild animal, right? He's like slaughters people, and he's much more aggressive. Yeah, so I like that too, but I actually love the older generation as well. You know, like when you had Agassi, and before that he had like John McEnroe.
Oh, yes,
really
McEnroe,
went all
man.
out, you know, on the court.
Yeah. Especially McEnroe, I always remember how he smashes rackets. I think that was my memory about McEnroe.
Or scolding the Empire.
Oh,
right?
yes,
Or, you know,
yeah, exactly.
It was just, I think it was more theatrical. You know, sometimes the players become too serious. You know, like that it's not so much fun to watch anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Rotterdam University, or did I get it right?
Utrecht, actually.
Utrecht,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And you did business. What made you choose that profession, and how did it turn out?
Yeah, so initially, I wanted to do medicine, right? I wanted to study medicine, or maybe rather, my parents liked me to study medicine. You know? I think probably very similar to like Asian families,
yes.
That parents are very important in making decisions, like what subject you would study. I went to medicine, but in the Netherlands, there aren't enough spaces, enough seats for the number of students that apply every year.
I see.
And so what you have is they have this lottery system where you just get a number. And usually maybe there's like more than 1,000 students who apply. And there's only a few hundred spots, right? So you actually have to be lucky to be able to study medicine. And so for 2 years in a row, I tried my luck, but I wasn't lucky.
I see.
And at the same time, my brother, who's 1 year older, he was lucky. He had a really good number. And he's a doctor now, a very good doctor. He's actually an intervention cardiologist in the Netherlands.
Wow.
But I'm actually glad that I didn't do medicine, because, I mean, looking at me now, I'm a bit more afraid to go to hospitals, or afraid of diseases. And so maybe I'm not really the right person, for it. So maybe it just happened for a reason that I didn't get enrolled into the program. But I was still interested in healthcare and reading about it, and potentially finding, solutions for healthcare, right? To take like science or technology and turning that into a business. So I started to do biomedical science, which is very much more like the deeper science, to learn about like DNA and learn about microbiology and all that, the neurology, all the subjects, right? And I really enjoyed that. But what I didn't like about it was going into the lab. I didn't like to do the experiments and all that. It's just not for me. I made a lot of mistakes doing that.
Okay.
I won't go into that. But in my first year, there was a professor, and he came in, and he came in front of the class. And he told us that for all the biomedical science students, there was an opportunity to, after 3 years, after you've done your bachelor's, to continue to do a master's in what they call science and business.
Oh.
And this is exactly for people like me, right, who wanted to translate science, read about science, learn about it, but turn it into business. Right? And so I just had to sit out for 3 years, and I just went through my bachelor's program. Of course, I enjoyed it, but again, the lab was not for me. But the 2 years after that, learning about management, finance, entrepreneurship was really, I really enjoyed those years. And it was really, for me, a transition to think about, hey, I want to get into business. I want to do something, probably something in the biotech space, but I don't know what yet. And so in my final year, I got an opportunity to go to the UK and actually study into Cambridge University and do more of a applied research program in epidemiology, which is basically around statistics in healthcare. I learned a lot about diabetes and all that. But really, my time there in Cambridge was very interesting, because I became exposed to entrepreneurship. I was involved in an entrepreneurship society for students. We organized business plan competitions for very enterprising young people. And this is really where I met different people from different backgrounds, investors, from industry, from the university, and really started thinking about, okay, I've got this background, I've got this science. My friend, he has a medical background. Another friend was a mathematician. How can we combine these skills to solve some very big, hairy problems in the healthcare industry, right? And that was really, for me, the starting point for my first startup that I did, which was my final year of university in Cambridge.
I see. And was that startup eventually commercialized in a way?
Yes, yeah, it was actually. So we went through the business plan competitions. We raised some seed funding, got some angel investors on board, and what we tried to do was something quite tough, because healthcare is usually led by like older people who are more experienced.
Correct.
And so we were a bunch of like guys in our 20s, right? So what do we know, right? But we wanted to make a difference in the way that drugs are developed, right? So right now, drugs go through a very rigorous clinical trials, preclinical trials, and it can sometimes take 10, 15 years before a drug is being commercialized,
Correct.
right? And that would cost a pharmaceutical company anything between 1 to 3 billion, or sometimes even more in US dollars.
Yes.
Right. And so we thought like, okay, that's interesting, right? But why would it take 10 to 15 years to get something to the market? And we figured out that one of the reasons why drugs fail and never reach the market is because they end up being toxic, right? They end up not being safe enough for people to use.
Correct.
But the problem is they only find this out in year 8, 9, or 10, after you spend a few $100 million already. So what if we come up with a software that can make those predictions on new drugs in development right out of the gates, right, in the first few years, and really only focus on the ones that have a higher chance to succeed.
I see.
And so it was kind of an AI. We didn't talk about AI. We talked about predictive toxicology at the time, but it was combining software and data, big data, and help pharmaceutical companies make predictions much better and cheaper and faster. And so we brought this to the market. We raised venture capital money. And that was ultimately also the reason why I ended up in Malaysia.
You answered my next question already. Good. Continue, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. It's good. It's good.
Actually, there's actually two reasons why I ended up in Malaysia. One is love and one is business. So let me talk about the business side first. Okay. So the business side is like we when we were in Cambridge, we met some VCs out of Malaysia. And they came over to the UK to scout for new technology, startups that could potentially be brought into this part of the world. Right? And I found it really interesting. And they really got to me at the right time, because it was this dreary, rainy, cold winter weekday, right, in the UK. It was really terrible, very miserable day.
Okay.
And so these Malaysians came over, they presented about what they're doing, what the vision is for the bioeconomy here in Malaysia. But all of that was all great. But the last slide really stuck with me, which was a nice, pristine beach, with sunshine. And, I was like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. I need to go to this place, whatever it is. And so in the end, after a lot of discussions, the VC decided to invest in us. We moved our headquarters to Malaysia, but still kept our data scientists in the UK. Then we had a lab in South Africa that did a lot of testing for us. And so really built out an international company. Okay. And that's we had to grow that, right, from here. But, of course, we faced a lot of challenges on the way as well, to get this out there. Yeah. So it was a very interesting time, on how I ended up here in Malaysia.
What period of time was this? Was this late 90s? I can't remember if I'm... when did you actually first step foot in Malaysia, actually?
I came here, I moved to Malaysia in the end of 2009, so 13 years ago. Okay. But I first started discussing with these Malaysian VCs back in 2007, 2008. And this was right during the financial crisis, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like any business or any startup was in trouble. Financial industry was in trouble. Being in the UK, in a sector in biotech that is like one of the riskiest sectors you can imagine, it was very, very difficult to raise any funding. And so that was one of the other reasons why we were lucky enough to raise some money from here, right? And expand our business.
I see. So what, besides business that led you to Malaysia, also you met your wife here, I'm guessing?
No, so I met my wife, then girlfriend at the time. She was a PhD student in Cambridge, an engineer. I see. And she was part of the entrepreneurship society as well. And she was managing all the finance for the society, and I was doing more the business development. And she, interesting story. She was promoting this MLM kind of thing. It's called what was it called? This vitamin C business,
Shakely? Is it Shakri or
No.
Elkin, Amway?
Gosh, sorry.
No worry.
But anyway, I was interested. I've got a biomedical background, but I was more interested to meet her, right? To get time with her. So it's okay, let's go for coffee. And, she talked for 3 hours about the business and how I can make money through that. But I was not really interested in that. And so it's just like, here we go, continue and let's watch a movie after this. So that's how it started.
Smooth.
Did she manage to sell you any vitamins, more important?
So in the end, I didn't buy into that because otherwise the relationship would also not be on a good starting point, right? Otherwise we say, I invested in it and that's why she loves me back,
Yeah.
Despite not giving her the business, we still ended up dating.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Go.
When you had the Malaysian VC that decided to put money with your company, what do you think convinced them? And what would you say? I'm not sure if this is a question later down, but what do you say?
Go ahead. Yeah.
What advice would you give to like startups to convince VCs to, like, how would you pitch to a VC essentially?
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And you would have to ask the VCs at that time what they saw in us. But I think that what we brought was something quite revolutionary. It was something very new in Cambridge, right? In a health tech cluster. So let alone in Malaysia, right? At that time, it was super new, and we had some IP around it. We had a very strong team with co-founders who really knew their stuff, and we were quite hungry to build a business. And at the same time, we also managed to bring some mentors on board, right? Some people from the industry. And I think that was really important because being a bunch of young guys, again, it was really sort of felt like being looked down on sometimes. Where you're like, okay, they're smart guys, but in business, your networks are also important, right? And how to open doors within big pharma companies. And so we managed to get some veterans on board. And ultimately, we recruited a guy who was, I think he spent about 20 years in the as a C-suite guy in the pharmaceutical industry. And he became our CEO, right? And I think for the VCs, the team is always really important, right? Having a team who can execute. Not just a team who's got a good idea or good technology. Getting something into the market really requires that kind of experience sometimes, right? And especially within this particular industry. So team is very important. Market opportunity was there, right? Because none of the pharmaceutical companies figured it out how to do it. Spending tons of money, as I said, into the billions for every drug. So the market opportunity was huge, right? And potentially there was a business model that could attract them. So I think those are the key ones. Team, probably number one. Market opportunity, very important too. And then having the right technology as well.
Great. So if I'm not mistaken, that is part of this company called Simugen, right? Which was
Simugen, yeah, correct. Yeah.
And how did it? It says here that you left it in June 2014. So how did it pan out in the end after all these rounds or whatever? Is it now a product that is readily available in the market? How is it shaped and how did it turn out actually?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and this is something I can probably talk about for an hour, but it was not a happy ending for us.
I see.
Because we worked with a lot of different suppliers. I mentioned just now, right? Like our data team was in the UK, we had a lab team in South Africa, and he had a business side in Malaysia. And and then we had like suppliers from around the world. And so the model that we built, the software and the AI, was built around how to explain this in a very sort of easy to understand way. It's built around a tissue model, like a cells, like human cells, right?
Okay.
And they were supplied by a supplier from France, right? And you can imagine if you want to build a data model, you need to have consistent supply of a particular cell model.
Okay.
Right. And so all the algorithms was built with a prototype in place. We showed that we could make predictions with 95% accuracy. Up to then, the first few years, everything was going well. But then the supplier from France decided to change their cell model from a live cell model to a frozen one.
Oh.
And from a logistics perspective, it makes absolutely sense that it's frozen, because then you can ship it out right easily to their customers. They can thaw it and they can use it. But for us, what it meant was that all the millions of dollars we invested into the algorithms had to be redone, recalibrated, right? Because it's a completely different model. And that didn't sit well with our VCs. And they said, well, guys, it took a few years to get here. Can you quickly come up with a new model, right? That works? And the answer was no, because we needed to redo everything. We did some consulting work, and we still use the old model, but at some point it was discontinued. And so we really felt that really hard. And the key lesson was just don't put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to your suppliers, right? So you should always diversify them and should not bet on one guy only. So that was a very, very hard lesson that we learned. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely need to meet up with coffee for you at this, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of lessons as well in part of the nuance. But so once you've done with Simogen, then you started off doing these things in entrepreneur in residence for Camtech. So what was that like? And more importantly, how did that segue into this thing called PlatCOM Ventures?
PlatCOM, yeah.
Yeah.
So Camtech is a company that's in Singapore, founded in Singapore by a friend of mine, also a friend from Cambridge, from the UK, a Singaporean guy. Set up that company to really with a vision to help medtech, medical technology startups, get into the market. So it's kind of an incubator, if you like.
Okay.
And so he invested some money into 4 startups, but he needed help to sort of build some structure around it. And so with my background from spending years building a biotech company, I thought this was quite interesting for me to sort of broaden my horizon and start looking at new technologies in maybe in the healthcare market, but in different segments.
I see.
Right? Because when you do a startup, right, you really have to be zoomed into one particular field for a long time and be very obsessed about it almost. Yeah. But it can also be quite tiring after a while, and you kind of, it's nice to have a refresher and to sort of broaden your horizon. And so that was an interesting time, which really learned to work with other founders, gave them some of my experience. And this is really where accelerators started to become hot, right? And so we set up one of the first accelerators in Singapore, a very structured program through mentors, through some funding, and really help these founders get into the markets. So it was a very, very interesting time. But I was still living in Malaysia at that time, and I was commuting like every week. And then in the second year, my wife gave birth to our first child, and it became a bit harder, right, to do that commuting. And so I decided to go back to Malaysia and focus on, working in an organization here. And that's how I ended up in PlatCOM.
I see. And maybe tell us from PlatCOM to Sunway. I think probably in a nutshell, how did that happen? And was it the allure of Tan Sri Jeffrey himself, or did you get headhunted? If there's a backstory to that.
Yeah, so PlatCOM at that time was set up under this agency, Innovasi Malaysia, which was under the Prime Minister's office, and the idea with PlatCOM was how do we help universities, right, in Malaysia, who are sitting on a lot of IP, right? Usually like patents, right? But a lot of these patents are sitting on the shelf, collecting dust almost, right?
Correct.
Because most of them never really see the light of day. They never get commercialized.
Correct.
And, meanwhile, they spend a lot of money on the IP, protecting it, maintaining it, and so on, right? So you wonder, okay, what's the point, right? If you don't really have an impact to that. So we started to look around different universities in Malaysia and see how we can help them to license these IPs into SMEs. And the idea was that the Malaysian SMEs, right, some of them were having a good business, but we're lacking that sort of strong IP to really grow, right, to have that technology drive behind them.
Yeah.
And so we connected the dots in terms of finding IP for SMEs, which could be like to digitalize their business, or it could be to give them some strength in their supply chains. but we help to transfer this IP into these companies who would then go on to commercialize it. Because the universities, right, they have really smart scientists and researchers, but they don't have the business people to commercialize it.
Precisely, yes.
Right? So to set really good companies around. SMEs know the business, but don't have the IP. And so we brought the two together. And in my time, I did like 25 license deals between universities, Malaysian universities, and SMEs. We got them funded, and some of them were quite successful in getting these to the market. And this is how I came to Sunway. So I came to Sunway because I met the vice chancellor of Sunway University. And, same thing as I was meeting other universities in Malaysia, right? And I was looking at the IP. It was still, as a private university, we didn't really dump a lot of money into like patenting, which I think is a good thing.
Okay.
But we're a lot more selective in terms of what do we file and what is our core focus.
Okay.
But I shared with him one of my views on like what innovation within the university could be like and how we can better connect to the industry. And the vice chancellor at the time said, well, that's interesting. Why don't you come and do it here? So that's how I set up the innovation in Sunway University and quickly set up the innovation labs that was now called Sunway iLabs. And that Sunway iLabs is now 5 years old and has really grown from strength to strength into different sides of the business. Yeah.
Actually, it peels me to the next question quite eloquently, because I was, how do I say, my experience of getting my tertiary was purely Malaysianized in a way. So I did my bachelor's degree in a local university, my master's, here as well. But the second master's was in with Curtin. It's an off-camp program. And what I noticed after coming up to industry was that there's not very close collaboration between the industry with the academia here, as compared to, you go to Europe, there's a lot, I feel, from my lens, it's very close-knit. In America, it's very close-knit. And in Malaysia, what are your thoughts, Matt? I mean, looking at it, I mean, yes, you're in a private university, but do you see the scene happening in public universities against the academia there, against the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point, and really the starting point of our iLabs. I think if you look around the world, I mean, I spent some time in Imperial College in London as well, where I worked in a tech transfer office.
Yeah.
And it's not that's, different actually, because also there you have a lot of researchers, good brains in the university, good technology, but also, people who don't really understand how do I bring that to the market? Precisely. How do I get actually someone to pay for this technology, right? And so tech transfer offices are set up to bridge that gap, right? Now the tech transfer scene in Malaysia is a lot more nascent than it is in the UK or in the US, right? So we saw the same thing, that interestingly in university we have good talent, good technology, can bring things to the market, but at the same time we also have corporations that are very successful in business, like Sunway, for example, built very successful 13 business units now, right? We're almost like number 1 and number 2 in each vertical. But we constantly need new ideas, new talents. So how do we connect the dots there? And that was really the starting point for iLabs, to build a platform for researchers and students to bring their ideas into the industry, but at the same time also really getting them to understand what problem are they trying to solve? What are the challenges really that need solving, right? And where you can spend a lot more time on. And so that's how we got started, right? And from there on, we realized that, okay, you have the students, you research, you've got the industry, but there's a plethora of startups out there as well in the ecosystem that could also solve problems for the industry. So we started to build out this ecosystem with the different players in there, from governments, startups, students, as well as the industry.
I love this point, and also I want to bring back the conversation we had about. I don't know whether you recall, everyone wants to build an app. Any teenager today wants to build an app. And then you were sharing Matt was sharing with me, MJ, about this very funny thing. I want to build an app, But then what are you solving? So that was Matt's question to them. What are you solving, right? And then he says, there's a lot of solving that needs to be done in agriculture, in, food supply chain and all these kind of things. And
but who wants to do that?
who wants to do that is not sexy. So
Which
maybe
kid wants to do that?
Yeah. So maybe can you elaborate more? I mean, especially in Malaysia where we're agriculture based. I mean, we have a lot to learn from your home country, Netherlands, biggest exporter of flowers, agriculture wise. What has not happened here in Malaysia that we should have emulated the Netherlands in a way?
Wow, that's a really big question. Well, let me try to break that down a bit. But I think like everyone wanted to build an app. Maybe that was like 4 or 5 years ago, especially then.
Yeah.
When we started iLabs and we did our first accelerator program for startups.
Yeah.
Most of the pitch decks that we got were big ideas around apps.
Yeah.
Well, I say big ideas. They were all very similar ideas, like they all want to do like a delivery app, or they want to do something that their neighbors or something that they heard. And they just, I also want to do that. Right? So at that stage, I think 4 or 5 years ago, the whole entrepreneurship scene was very glorified, right? It's like, oh, cool to be an entrepreneur, cool to build an app. And I think there was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
And there was maybe something that Malaysia needed to go through to build up that culture and people, finding it cool to be an entrepreneur and be proud of it.
Yeah.
Because I think in Malaysia, like Asian culture is also very much like, oh, wow, you go out yourself, you don't work for a big company, you don't go through the traditional routes, right? You may not, your parents or your uncles or aunties, they may all start to say, hey, who's this guy, I can't get a job, unemployed. Whereas you're really working on your own startup, which, you find very interesting. And so that cultural barrier, I think that was also like in the way, right? To see more startups, more entrepreneurship happening here. I see that changing now. I think over the last 5 years, especially, where I think entrepreneurship is very much accepted, more accepted professionally. Not completely yet, but it's getting there. But at the same time, we have to start focusing more on ideas, again, that solve real big problems in the industry.
Correct.
Not just an app for this or that, right? I think that's we see that changing now a bit. Of course, the whole digitalization has happened, right? A lot more corporates needed to digitalize their brick and mortar businesses, and I think a lot of startups jumped on that and actually come up with good solutions, made good money around that. We see companies like Karsem, for example.
Yeah.
Interesting, Karsem, the founder, is an ex-Sunway student.
Okay.
And so we are now working very closely with Karsem as well. But we are very proud to see that what he has built, right, being the first unicorn in Malaysia, and build a platform that really helps people. Because the problem that people face in that industry is like, how do I sell my car, right? Or how do I buy a car?
Correct.
If I go to any broker or any car workshop, I feel like I'm being, that they're trying to rip me off, right?
Yes.
I'm not getting a good deal.
That's right.
So they made that industry very transparent, very data driven, right? It's very obvious. And so I think that really changed the whole ball game for the automotive industry. And I think they have a lot more way to grow.
Yeah.
But we need to see more of those startups who see that huge problem and build something around it, get the traction, and then grow it up, right? And maybe, in the Netherlands, you mentioned agriculture. And of course, I think Netherlands became an agriculture powerhouse over the last 20 years.
Yes.
And interestingly, it was driven down from a policy perspective, because back in 2000, agriculture wasn't such a big deal. And as of course, the flower industry was, but in terms of producing vegetables and all that, still very, produced enough, I think, to consume in our own country and maybe some neighboring country. But to become the second biggest exporter in the world, you need technology, right?
That's right.
And so the Dutch government said, what we need to produce twice as much with half the resources that we have. 2x production with 50% of the resources, right? Because we're a very small country.
That's right.
Right? We don't have much land.
And you don't have much arable land somewhere.
That's much arable land, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's what we see now, right? Like countries like Israel or Singapore. These are the guys where we see most innovation in the agriculture industry, because they are pressurized and they have these constraints that they need to get around. And so technology and innovation will thrive. And then what we've seen in the Netherlands is that it didn't just grow by 2x the output, it grew by 20x.
That's right.
Right. And they used the new like urban farm technologies, greenhouses, to really achieve that. And I think I was very inspired by that when I went to the Netherlands, I think 6-7 years ago. I went to visit this university called Wageningen University.
Okay.
Another one for you to pronounce.
Wageningen.
Stick to football players.
So they are the #1 university for agriculture in the world.
Oh.
And really interesting to see that around that university, you had a whole cluster of startups, industry, investors all coming together. And it reminded me of my time in Cambridge, where we saw the same thing. And I think this is important for Malaysia to realize, is that we don't just need big universities and a lot of students, but around a university, you need to have that knowledge transfer happening.
Correct.
Universities to the startups, investors around to put in the money, and it all needs to sort of work in tandem, right, with each other. And I think this is something that's growing. I think I've seen a lot of change happening over the last 10 years, but still something where we can work on. Yeah.
So let's not put all the constraints and the burden of the government of the day. Maybe and there's this very loosely word used government-private partnership initiative.
Public-private.
Public-private, correct, that's the word. So where do you think the private sector can do more? Where do you think the government could do more, in a way, to help incubate what you just mentioned? What was the university's name again? Wageningen, right?
Wageningen,
Wageningen, yeah. So how can we create that? What do you think is lacking from both the private sector and also the public sector, in a way?
Yeah, that's a big one as well. I think, from the government, I think there's a lot of incentives already in the market, right? And we have good agencies like MDEC, Cradle. You have like Magic, which is now Amranti.
Yeah.
A lot of incentive, but maybe like there's less focus on grants, right? And then I think that's a good thing. Right, like 5-10 years ago, everyone was talking about grants because that's the only way to get funding. It's either grants or you get a bank loan. But
that's right.
No bank loan wants to fund a startup, right, with technology as a collateral.
Yes.
So that has changed, and I think the grants have now sort of been replaced by more private funding. Right, and because we've seen over especially the last 3-4 years, more venture capital firms being set up in Malaysia. Of course, not comparable to Singapore yet, but of course that's not maybe a fair comparison. We see more angel investors as well, right? More people build a successful business and they want to sort of give back and then maybe recycle not just their money, but also their knowledge in building a business. And now we see different platforms like ECF, right? For P2P loans.
Yes.
Corporates now getting into the business as well, having corporate venture capital arms like Sunway's Sunseed Capital and the Orbit funds that we have, right? So in that sense, I think the private industry has really stepped up.
I see.
Right, and it's really become a lot more involved in the whole startup innovation ecosystem, and I think that was needed, right? And then from the government side, I think the policies, I think they're all there. I think it's a good thing that there are maybe less grants now and less focus on grants, because I think back in the day we had this term called grant-entrepreneurs, right, where we just like entrepreneurs just like chasing for grants, right, going from one agency to the next. And I saw my fair share by my time in PlatCOM Ventures, and those entrepreneurs just tend not to make it. It's guys like Carson who never got a grant from anywhere, right? But they just purely focus on solving a problem, being very obsessed about it, and going out to the market and raising their own funds.
Yes.
So in that sense, I think, from the government, they should not do too much. They should just have the right policies in place and then take a step back, and let the private sector take over.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, looking at, I would draw a parallel to probably public capital markets in Malaysia. The industry that has done really, really well was actually the semicon and electronic sector in Penang. I'm pretty sure I think you did have a post on Chu Jian Wang, the Vitrox guy. So they didn't really get grants. They did in somewhat through tax incentive and tax breaks, but no one bankrolled them. Virtually they bootstrapped. So I think you made a good point. I'm just adding on to more evidences to say that, until you're hungry and you're focused when you're poor, not when you're rich. Because when you're given a grant, in a way you're rich, and then you start to do kind of silly things.
I think it also gives the idea, and you can correct me wrong, that money kind of solves your problem when really that's not the issue, right? Usually you need, money can only solve certain problems. Will you say that to be the case?
Well, yeah, money is important. I mean, like I experienced in my startup, right? If we had enough capital, we would maybe be successful at that time, right? Because we would be able to pivot the business. So most startups, they fail because they run out of cash. But the best way for getting money is getting customers money, right? Because that is recurring revenue. That is money that keeps building up.
And they don't ask for a bought seat, right? The customers.
They don't ask for a board seat, and they don't ask for reports every month, like some grants would do, right? So the best source of money is still from customers and building a business. It's interesting you mentioned about Vitrox, right? And, I mean, Sunway is a similar example. Talk to our senior management, they would never have raised venture capital in the past, right? They got bank loans, maybe, but a lot of business grew organically.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that's really how we've grown in Sunway, from construction to development to healthcare, education, all grown organically.
Yes.
Right? And I think that sense of building a solid business around solid fundamentals, looking at P&L, is something that sometimes needs to be pumped back into the current entrepreneurs. Right?
Correct.
And not just thinking about, I need to raise my A rounds, then I need to my B round, C round,
Y rounds. I have to ask you, very curious, from the perspective of, someone who migrate to Malaysia. I know you're Malaysianized, but you've not been here since the beginning, right? So I just want to get your thoughts on what really surprised you about running iLabs when you're looking at all these Malaysian entrepreneurs and their ideas that you didn't expect when you started iLabs. What was really unexpected?
Great question. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Very good question as well. What I didn't expect.
Good and bad.
One of the things I think from running iLabs from the beginning, right? So in the beginning, we were very focused on student programs, entrepreneurship programs, right? And educating entrepreneurs. We still do, but that's now one of our divisions, right? Whereas we now do also venture capital. We have our own talent school for a coding school, like a 42KL.
Yeah.
But when I was looking at the talents, the students, they were very academically inclined, right? And I think getting good marks is really the prime reason why they are in the university. And I think there was very little interest, I think, to do extracurricular things beyond that. And then I think from an entrepreneurship perspective, we wanted to pull in more students really to learn about doing a business model canvas, building a startup. The interest was there. I think there was an underlying interest, but it was not a priority, right? And what really struck me, and maybe you guys can resonate with this, is that a lot of the students, when they came in one of our programs, or they helped out to run a pitch competition or a hackathon, they were not really interested in the process or networking and meeting people. They were interested in getting a certificate at the end of it.
That's right. Oh, yes.
And I was
highly resonating.
This was built into us when we were 7, actually.
That's right.
Exactly. And then I realized, also getting kids myself and going through these preschools, that a lot of parents ask for these certificates even when they're 4 years old. And then I was like, what is this? Because, when I started to recruit people, and then they come for an interview and they bring this whole pile of certificates from whatever classes or programs are organized, I don't care. I don't really care. Just tell me about you, about your story and what you've done, But these certificates, I think people are really way too obsessed about it in Malaysia.
Oh, man.
Actually, I really love that you brought this up because, MJ didn't finish his college in a way. and you know, there's a stigma. Sad to say, there's a stigma around it, and sometimes it's like, where's your cert? You know, where's your tertiary education? And here we have people in Facebook that, you know, you if you have a CV, which is your CV is virtually a code that you wrote, I don't care where it came from. Yeah, and you know, it's so interesting that you brought up Project 42, because I read about them on Fortune. I don't know whether, MJ, if you heard of Project 42. So correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, they actually bring homeless people to code. So it's like you do not have to to have a good pedigree of a high school whatsoever, good grades, but as long as you're willing to code, willing to learn, then you get a chance. You know, is that why Project 42 was built back here in Malaysia, and then is that the right interpretation I put up, Matt?
Yeah. So one of the it's definitely correctly pointed out. So one of the reasons why we were interested in 42 was, first of all, we were working with a lot of startups and fast-growing tech companies, and a lot of them came to me and said, Matt, you know, I know you have a computer science degree, and you have good students coming out, but they are not ready to be plugged into the workforce. They need to be upskilled or reskilled, or sometimes like unlearn certain things that they learned.
Then you think, what's the point? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
So there were not enough talents, right, with the right skills, and so we were looking for coding schools, and most coding schools were still teacher in front of the class telling students what to do, and you learn, you know, after that, right, going through curriculum and all that, very traditional. But what we saw in 42, which came out of Paris, was there's no teachers, there's no classrooms, and there's also no tuition fee for the students.
Yes.
And as you said, John, you know, like the students don't need any background, no certification, no degree whatsoever is required.
Yes.
And when I first heard that, when the French first pitched that to me, I was like, they must be smoking something. You know, like, how is this possible? You know, like, so I flew out to Paris and met the guys there, and I was really like, you know, like blown away when I saw what sort of talents they were building.
Yes.
And how the school has grown into Silicon Valley, Brazil, other European countries, and you know, companies like LinkedIn, Facebook. All the big tech companies, Twitter, they were recruiting from 42.
Correct.
Not because they have very good degrees or certificates, but they can do shit.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they really learn by doing. And you know what's interesting is that it's because there's no teachers.
Yes.
Right? So there's two ways to learn. You either figure it out from YouTube or Google it, or you learn from the guy next to you.
Correct.
Right? It's peer-to-peer education. And I think that is really how tech companies work.
That's right.
There's people around you, so you solve problems together.
Yes.
Right? And that's how you learn how to build code or solutions around.
Yes.
And so it doesn't really matter what language of code you're writing first, but it's about the attitude. It's about the mindset, right?
Precisely.
On the problem solving. And we really love that the what they had done, you know, around the world. You know, and I think they're now in 30 countries.
Yeah.
And currently we have more than 120 full-time students that were selected from 4,000 students that applied.
Wow.
Interestingly, from the 120, 40% is from the B40.
Fantastic.
And that was one of the questions. I mean, first of all, we were like, well, is this the kind of program that will work in Malaysia where people are being spoon-fed, right, since day one?
Yeah.
Can people really learn themselves by doing?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. There are people who are really hungry to do it by themselves.
Yeah.
And the second one was like, can we reach out to the B40 and population that can't afford a normal education?
Correct.
Again, you know, like these people are super hungry and they can learn really fast by doing.
Yes.
And now we are placing them in industry with big banks, logistics players like DHL is an anchor partner. Carsem is one of our anchor partners. They are also looking to recruit from it. So we're really changing the entire talent development and tech development industry, right, by this program. But a lot more needs to be done. You know, we need a lot more because 120 full-time is not going to make a difference.
Oh, yeah,
we need
it's not. Yeah.
120,000, you know, students.
Which is why I have to ask, right? Because you've clearly identified a huge problem that is decades long actually in Malaysia, which is this whole spoon-feeding, you know, certificate obsession culture. And you used earlier on that a lot of these people and parents in Malaysia, they really don't care about the process, right? How do you shift the attention of, obviously you won't do it alone, but what do you think is the right solution or solutions for the nation or for someone as an individual who perhaps he identify as someone who is certificate obsessed, who is, just give me the paper. How do you shift them and say, you know what? The process is actually more important.
Yeah. I think it's just being open-minded, right? I mean, I think the mindset is really important to try out different things. And maybe in classes, right? Maybe already because when you think about it, right? Your tertiary education in university, sometimes it's too late to change people's mindset.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I think it needs to start at the grassroots, right? From the primary schools, your secondary schools. They already need to start, run things like hackathons and do some coding programs, and it needs to be part and parcel of your day-to-day education, because then it becomes muscle memory. People will remember it, right? And I think then it's really when you can start seeing change happen.
That's right.
If you're gonna wait until someone matures, it's too late sometimes. Not for everyone, maybe, right? People can still turn things around.
Yeah.
But I think really to have a much bigger impact, I think the education curriculum needs to change, right? And you need to start giving people time, giving students time to explore, right, what they can do and to expose them to new technology, right? I think that's probably the only way to do it.
Yeah. And I probably, in essence of time, I probably have to ask one last question, then definitely a round two, because there's many more questions I want to ask. STEM versus arts versus TVET in Malaysia, Matt, related to your last point. Where do you think our efforts should be poured in based on Malaysia as the economic, based on the economic activities we have, based on our culture and the nuance, and linking back to, we shouldn't wait until they're into the tertiary, because there's always this stigma, so you brought this obsession about certificates, and it's actually very related to, I don't know about your wife, and maybe she can relate this experience. Once you reach upper secondary, there's a streaming process where you do your PMR. I don't know what is it called now.
PT3, I think.
PT3. If you don't do well, you go to an arts class and you're stupid.
Yeah.
And then if you go to a science class, you're smart, right? So you see, and you go to a vocational school. Oh, you mean you're the lousy ones?
Yeah, you couldn't, even in vocational school, you couldn't get into, the academic line or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
So probably we end the podcast with your answer, right? And then we'll go on to part two.
Yeah, interesting. I think that, you're right. There's definitely a stigma around that. Let's talk about TVET.
Yeah.
First, right? Maybe because we talk about 42, which I think is very much TVET.
Precisely.
If you look at Germany, right, countries like Germany, where TVET is huge.
Yes.
Right, and the students that graduate from TVET schools have the best jobs, right? in companies like Siemens, and guess what? These companies are actually waiting outside of the gates of these colleges to recruit the students.
Correct.
Because they can build things, right? And they are really necessary to grow industries, right? Especially focus on manufacturing engineering.
That's right.
Problem in Malaysia is, again, the stigma, as you said. If you don't go into university, or you must be stupid, right? TVET, I think, needs to be maybe rebranded. Because even TVET, I think that because people have that perception, you must be just a mechanic or just a whatever.
Yeah.
Tech, in a way, tech skills are also part of a TVET education, but maybe we need to come up with a sexier name
for TVET,
right? So that people feel more aspirational about going into like a school like that. And I think that's part of the job what we're doing now, and part of the challenge is just to map out this trajectory and to say, okay, if you go through 42KL, you learn for 1 year or 2 years, you work with the industry, you get a job.
Yeah.
Around the world, it's almost like 100% of all the students got a placement with one of the really top tech companies, right? Or they started their own business. Successful startups came out of it.
Yeah.
But only until you have these case studies and you can actually show that trajectory, people start believing that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that's our challenge, that we are fighting against in a way, right? That people only think, oh, you must go through accounting, then you have to join the big four companies, and only then you are perceived in your family, at least, as successful, right? Whereas there's many other routes that you can take. So that's TVET. I think STEM is something very interesting, something I'm personally very interested in as well. But I think it's one of those areas where if you want to innovate and you want to elevate your national income to a high income nation, STEM is going to be crucial, right? And STEM, encompasses science, technology, engineering, maths. I would say arts should also be part of that, because arts is also woven into STEM. I think people call it STEAM in other countries.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that's something I think in Malaysia we can do much more about. I mean, it's frightening sometimes when you hear how little in secondary schools students spend on actually doing science experiments.
Oh, yes.
How little money or how poor some lab facilities are, right? That people really get exposed by doing things, by building stuff.
Correct.
I mean, for myself, I only got interested into science in university, because that's when I started to do some cooler things, right? Rather than small stuff, So I think it's important that you do that. You give students the right tools, right, to experiments, but it also needs to be framed around concepts, right? Around, big challenges again, right? That can be solved, or stories, right? That make people feel like, hey, I understand science. If there's a story built around it, people understand. I mean, just to give you an example, right? Like my wife and I founded a company called Science Bridge Academy, I think 7 years ago.
Okay.
My wife is still running it. And started out simply by running enrichment classes for STEM.
Wow.
And one of the workshops we ran, and we still do, is a workshop called CSI, Crime Scene Investigation.
Okay, that's cool.
And the students had to solve like murder mysteries,
Okay.
And, they have to use a microscope to find at a crime scene like some material that they found to see whether it's from the perpetrator or not. They have to take DNA samples and, do some experiments around it. So they do a lot of experiments, but at the same time, there's a story around it, right? And there's something that they can solve, something that they love doing. This is something that's really important, to really embed that within the education system, because if not, it just becomes like something, I must go to school, I must memorize something, and I regurgitate it during my exam.
Yes.
And guess what? I mean, how much do you remember from your
I don't.
From your high school, from your exam?
I don't. Yeah. You already have a next client. I'm gonna send my kids over. I didn't even realize this thing happened. So, in interest of time, Matt, I think any last questions for
Actually, I have one, and I'm just take as short as you need to answer. The part where John mentioned earlier on that you send your kids to Chinese school, right?
Yes.
I found it very interesting. What's the thought process behind that? Are you muted?
You're muted.
Very, very simple. I just listened to my wife.
Okay, nice.
I'm not sure. Are you married, MJ?
No. No, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not attached.
or maybe John can resonate with this. Right? You can't win every battle at home. Certain things, your wife just needs to make the decision. Others, you have to make the decision. But in a way, I mean, I'm joking a bit, right? Because I did look at it as different options, but I do believe Chinese is a very important language. It's becoming increasingly important in business as well. I think it's a really good foundation for the kids. I like also that it's a bit structured, right? And especially the beginning years.
Yeah.
But the concern I have is that maybe it's sometimes too structured, right? Too tough, too academic
rigid
from the beginning,
yes.
Too rigid. And so it's important that if you do send your kids to a Chinese school, like we do, that you also give them opportunities to have a football class or music class, or to do some enrichment for STEM, to explore themselves a little bit more. But I mean, interestingly, I asked my daughter, right? She's 8. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to do everything online.
Yeah.
So I asked her, she just went to Chinese school for 1 year, right? So I asked her, so what do you like more, right? Do you like the physical class or do you like the online class in your Chinese school? And she said, Daddy, that's a silly question. of course, I like my online class better. It's like,
Why?
I said, why is that? He said, because, like online class teacher cannot beat me through the screen,
Nice.
That's
yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll probably do the Chinese school for a few years, get some foundation, but maybe we do other things after that. Yeah, we haven't decided yet.
Great. So Matt, it's been a pleasure. I'm craving for more now, so we definitely have to schedule part 2. For the viewers out there, if you enjoyed this conversation with Matt, you've gotten some insights to the startup scene, more so on the education system as well. Do hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell.
Where can
people find you, Matt? Most importantly.
Yeah.
You can easiest is on LinkedIn, right? Under my name, Matt van Leeuwen.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the comment section below. And it's been an absolute pleasure, Matt. MJ.
Well, excellent, man. I'm looking forward to part 2 for sure.
Yeah.
Too short.
Too short. It's definitely too short.
I enjoyed talking to you guys. Maybe next time over coffee as well.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So thank you all, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.